Welcome to Beyond Belief, Tales of Religious Exodus, where we delve into the personal journeys of people who've left fundamentalist religions. In this series, we explore their experiences within religion, their journey out, and how they found meaning and healing on the other side.
All right, Kevin, welcome to the Beyond Belief podcast. And I'm going to invite you to actually introduce your role and talk a bit about what you do. And then we'll go back and talk some about your own experience with religion and how it interfaces with what you do today.
Yeah, I'm very happy to be here. So I'm the executive director of the Secular Student Alliance. And so we are 501c3 not-for-profits, yada, yada, yada. The real heart of what we do is we have student chapters, primarily in college universities, but also in high schools. As the percentage of young people who don't identify with religion has been increasing, we've seen junior high, middle school. We have a partnership for elementary schools. We're getting into some homeschooling for non-religious students. And so we know about 80% of our students grew up in a religious household and have or are, in essence, leaving religion for the most part. Of course, we do have secular folks in there as well who grew up in secular families. But we really provide resources. It's for them to be on their campuses, to build community, like-minded friends, impactive community. They do lots of service work, events, normalizing non-religion. So we're here to support them.
Very cool. And I want to hear a lot more about what you guys do. And I want to start though with like your own experiences with religion and how did that impact your role today? I'm assuming there's some sort of arc there.
Sure. So I grew up Roman Catholic. So I was altar boy for years. My mother was heavily involved in the church. She is an artist, and so she would do the vestments that the priest would wear. She would do like backdrops as part of the church. She was on the wine committee, but I think that was just because she liked drinking wine. But she even would bake the unleavened bread for communion and those sorts of things. So sort of a long history growing up Catholic.
Very interesting. It's funny. I don't encounter many Catholics. Canada has a lot of Catholics. That's where I live now. But Catholic feels very Boston. I don't know. To me, that's immediately what I think.
There is a long history with Catholics of Boston. Yes.
Yeah. So is that like a long line of Catholics? Like your grandparents are Catholic? Like that's been like the trajectory for years?
My mother's side was Catholic, and sort of in later life went to church every single day. And then my dad's side of the family was Episcopalian. And so, the weekly churchgoer. But yeah, both, throughout their life were participated in religion and was important in their lives.
And outside of like going to church, right? Church is such a central part in Christianity, especially, and you said your mother's really active there. Was Christianity felt in like the day to day?
Not as much, I think. I mean, I think there was, we did do, we had obviously Sunday school, and we were involved in other events that would take place in the church. But my brother and I, as the two active boys, into sports, and doing, so after school, weekend starter stuff. So I remember more of that than sort of the religious component. And the Catholic Church is, well known for its, equality for women, LGBT folks, those sorts of things. So my mother was actually always an advocate within the church for more women's equality. And so I remember her was always, questioning what the church was doing and why wasn't the church being more inclusive and addressing it with the priest. And, she was vocal about it, and rightfully so. And so I remember there was always it wasn't an almighty figure and you could question it. And that came from my mother. So, and then just even, the sermons and those sorts of things, on Sundays, it was my mother always interpreted those were stories, and we need to interpret those for everyday life. And then how we lived our everyday life. So we didn't, they weren't real stories, like true stories. They were meant to teach us lessons and to be good people.
Okay, cool. So you were able to have like a balanced view of it, to champion for change around it, and to be able to not take everything at face value and be able to kind of pull the good from a story and how it could make you better, or maybe I'm adding to that, but
No, yeah,
that's kind of what I'm hearing.
no, a good story, a good moral, a good value, a good lesson. So
Yeah. Yeah. And yet it seems that you're not religious now.
not.
What happened, Kevin?
So well, I don't know. I mean, I do. Coming out as gay, I think was a big part of it. And the Catholic Church still isn't great, and was much worse at its sort of relationship with the gay community and its teachings and morals and values on the LGBT community. So for me, and the part of my own identity in coming out was also not recognizing that the church didn't value me at the time. So why am I investing in the church? And so I think there was a separation from the organized religion part of it at first. And then I think once we start to do that, then there was the slow move of, do I believe all this? And as vocal as, non-religion was, and, being involved in advocating for Prop 8 in the United States when the Catholic Church and the Mormon Church were actively campaigning and donating millions against it. So, I'm like, just the hypocritical, your values and your deeds are not aligned at all. And so then what else isn't? And I slowly left religion and slowly didn't believe that there was a God anymore. How could all of this be if all, what we're seeing on the earth is true? But yeah, it took me a longer time to identify as non-religious solely. And so I was really getting this position where, I had someone call and go, "Hey, I think you'd be really good for this job." And I was like, "Ooh," well, I don't believe in God. And I probably never would have used it to describe myself as an atheist or as like non-religious. I was like, yeah, I just don't do religion anymore.
Mm. So, and then next thing you knew, you were the head of the Secular Student Alliance. Secular Student Alliance. Yeah. So if you don't mind, if we can dive deeper into a few things.
Sure.
I actually not familiar with what's Prop 8, the thing that they were campaigning against.
Prop 8, so Proposition
Prop 8
in California was the bill to legalize same-sex marriage in the state.
Okay. And the Catholic Church was very much against it, which
Yes.
is sort of flying a basic value of yours.
Right.
Are you comfortable talking more about what it was like, I guess, before you left, but knew you were gay? Like there's that period of time where it's like no man's land, and it could be many years for people. And then the societal aspects, I don't even know if you're like open about it yet, but yeah, if you're comfortable talking more about that.
Sure. Yeah, I do. I mean, there was I think people are on their own journey. I think on their own journey. If you're gay, if you're LGBT, you go on your own journey of your self-discovery. Admitting it to yourself, talking about it to other people, being publicly out, those sorts of things. So that's all a process, and it takes time. And I do think there's a correlation with that of also, if you grew up religious, of sort of how you then become non-religious and the process of that. And so obviously I came out as gay, and I do remember my aunt is also gay. Every generation in my family would find out there's a gay person. So genetic.
Genetics.
Yeah, right. So in talking to her and just like, hey, how did you come out to the family? And she's like, well, why? And I was like, well, I'm next. So there, congratulations, But it was also then she asked, she was, well, how are you interpreting this and relating this with religion? And I said, the Catholic Church obviously doesn't support me or the LGBT community. So why am I investing back in it? And so I think that part of, I didn't wrestle a lot with the moral and implications of the church. I was like, I just don't agree. And everything that, that my mom, taught us about being good people and the lessons we should learn. And I also think the questioning of the authority based on women's rights and women's inclusion in the church, I think that made it so much easier for me to go, yeah, sorry, I don't buy into it. And it was very easy for me to sort of release that. But then, I still went to not Catholic church, but Episcopal church, All Saints Church in Los Angeles, super progressive, super social justice-y. And part of it was mostly because of community. Like I had a group of friends who were there. And so it was about community, about doing stuff. And, I didn't, because of my relation to the Catholic Church, I would not do communion. Like I just could, and in the Episcopal Church, it means something different, but my bringing up, I was like, no, like you have rejected me. No, I can't. So so you do see it play out in a little places like that, but so yeah.
So there was sort of was it like a period of time or like a gradual unfolding where you're like, okay, well, I'm not going to do the Catholic thing, but I can still go to church for community. I'm going to withhold from certain activities that don't feel right at this time, and sort of like an easing out in a way.
I think it was, and I think if I didn't have the group of friends who went to the Episcopal Church, I would have just stopped. And I would have just stopped. But I did stop, and there was a few years in between then. So, and part of that was probably in college. I do remember in college, sort of like having the conversation going home in college and going, yeah, I'm not going to church with you all, and that being a point, like having to actually have that conversation and sort of, hold the line. And I sort of did it until my grandmother passed away, and then being very Catholic. And so I was like, after that, I was like, no, I'm just not going anymore. And so there was a number of years before then started going back because of sort of that community aspect and friends, and then just sort of devolved out of that as well.
Mm. Yeah. So that aspect of needing to maintain a certain amount of it for family, in this case, slightly extended family, but still
Yeah.
having to do it. Was there, and I might be digging for things that aren't there. So just a suggestion, was there an emotional component, like a loss, like, oh, this was good for me and I don't have it anymore? It sounds a little bit matter of fact, almost like transactional in a way. Like I'll do for for the church if the church will do for me. And if they can't, then I'm not showing up anymore. And that may be what it was.
Yeah, I think it was more of, it was more transactional. I think because when you sort of when you realize your true identity and you sort of have to rebuild yourself within a new world, if you will, as a new person. So I think that was very quick for me to shed. And but I do, if I look back there, communion, and like there were a few things that lingered on, like the Lord's Prayer. And there's a few things that lingered on. I was like, yeah, I'm not going to say that part. And I do remember even in Episcopal Church, yeah, I'm not going to say God. So that was years later. And it was sort of each little thing, like, what am I comfortable with? What am I not comfortable with? So are there some things that were probably there for a while? Yes. I do think there's the leaving church at the beginning. You didn't have to deal with it. So it was when you're in church, even though, Episcopal Catholic light, if you will. Then I still had to wrestle with those things. And it was, again, I think a general devolve out of like, yeah, I'm not gonna do that. Yeah, I'm not gonna do that. Yeah, I'm not gonna do that.
Hmm. So is it correct in saying that once you leave the church, like the physical environment of it, it gets a lot easier because there isn't that pressure all around you kind
I
of thing?
think so. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially true, I think, for Christianity. I've been talking to guests from the Jewish faith and Muslim faith, and there's a lot more laws that kind of chase you wherever you go.
Mhm.
And with the church being such a central part for Christianity, um, especially if it's more liberal, obviously that's often the case. So I'm not going to generalize. Is there anything I could counterpoint? Is there anything that you miss from that time?
I, mm, like, I mean, community is a huge aspect, but I've rebuilt that. Like, I've been very active, active in activism. I guess it's a little repetitive there, but I've been an activist and have fulfilled needs there, and that has brought a lot of intentional community. I have a great sense of friends who we do a lot together. We have a great neighborhood where we do, so we're super active. So I think a lot of people miss that community, but I have built that back multiple times, and so that aspect I don't miss. And yeah, and I like to watch the political shows now on Sunday morning rather than going to church. I can stay in my pajamas and have hot coffee.
Exactly. Yeah. I had a friend who said he regained a seventh of his life back by not keeping the Sabbath.
Mm.
And I certainly got to reclaim hours of my day every day by not going to pray because we were doing the three times a day kind of thing.
Oh wow, yeah.
Yeah. I want to ask you more about community because it's probably one of the biggest challenges when people leave religion, and it's one of the things that keeps people in religion the most. But I think we'll talk about it at the end after we talk about what you guys do specifically, because I know that is a flavor of community. So tell me a bit, diving in a bit more to what your organization does. I guess I'll let you start wherever you want about like the need, if you will.
Sure. And I do think, there, the number, as the percentage of young people are leaving religion or leaving organized religion, not identifying with religion. And there's a wide spectrum there. So you have your atheists and agnostics, and your skeptics, and then you get into spiritual, and people like, well, I just don't go to church. But so there's a huge variance in there, which is completely fine. And a caveat is we do have religious members, like student members, in the organization, and and what we largely find from talking with them is they want to have philosophical conversations about their own religion, but oftentimes their religion isn't a safe place to have that conversation. And our students are like, sure, happy to have that. Which side do you want? Like, you can be anti and I'll be pro. Like, we can totally, like, I'll take whatever side you want. So so I really enjoy that aspect where our students are sort of very inviting, and like, it's not anti-religion. It is sort of a much more multicultural aspect. And we find a lot of young people today now aren't as subscribed to the labels. And so like, yeah, I'm non-religious. I have a religious friend. It's not a big deal. And so we see much more of that today. But for our organization, that being said, I make it sound very easy. We do have students who come from very highly religious, sometimes highly controlling religious, conservative religious families and communities, who leaving religion is a huge deal, and whose family disowned them. We had a student not that many years ago who, like, we have Ask an Atheist Day, and a chance for the students to be on campus, set up a table, ask us any question. And we do it online. Sometimes they're fun, like, what'd you have for breakfast today? And so we answer, jokingly back fun. But there are those sort of philosophical values-based questions, which we answer seriously. So the students sort of do the same thing. And he did a post on his social media about participating in Ask an Atheist Day, and received a call from his parents going, you have to take that down. He was like, well, no, I'm not going to. And so they completely cut him off. And they were paying his tuition, and they said, we're not paying your tuition anymore. They tried to take away his car, which he had paid for. And so he was the president of the chapter. And he's like, look, I have to step down because I have to get a second job. He goes, I know now. He goes, I'm not going back. So I have to graduate. So that has to be my first priority, which obviously we completely understood and support. So there are huge variances as far as people's experience in their family and leaving religion and those sorts of things. But we still find that, a lot of people are looking for some community, and there's, religious community. It's one thing religion does well is community and building that and having support networks. And so having like, I still think, I thought I was the only atheist on campus. I'm like, there's a lot, on a campus. And so, having that like-minded friends, and some of our chapters are very social based. So they do lots of social events. Some are very activist based. We have high schools in Texas who are going in and, testifying at school boards, against some of their policies that they're trying to put in place, and those sorts of things. So some of them are very service oriented. So we just had a group of students who were in Asheville, North Carolina, doing disaster recovery after the hurricane, the huge floods that went through Asheville. So they're what they do, they get to decide that. So they're very autonomous in that aspect, but for us, in providing services and resources and programs and all, we do lots of free stuff for all of the student chapters and the student leaders, makes it challenging for us. But the good part is that really means that they get to meet the needs, whatever those needs are, of the students on their individual campuses. And that's sort of the goal of it all.
That's awesome. That's really cool to hear that. How many campuses are you guys on?
We are on about 200. So we've still been sort of building back post-COVID, like most things that involve in education and those sorts of things. So we're, rebuilding steam again, and we're seeing that. And we're actually seeing lots of interest from high school students this semester. So, which is always good. So always, it's a little bit different than the college university where a majority of our students are. But yeah, so it's always good.
That's awesome. And I'm very curious, from my own curiosity, like the different patterns, if there's patterns like East Coast, West Coast by state of the kinds of things that they're engaged in, like, is Utah just full of ex-Mormons, like anything like that? I don't know if you guys even know, but I would love to hear anything you've noticed.
When we do sort of surveys and stuff, we're looking holistically at the all of the chapters and those are things. But yes, we do get into just working with the students and our staff, who's the main contact and really gets to know the students personally and what they're doing. So yeah, yes, Utah is ex-Mormons. And I think Utah is mostly Mormons, so we do see that, and it's there. Beyond that, there's not a real rhyme or reason. So I will say we need wise in your more religious communities, or where there's more religious predominance, we will find that students will gravitate to us slightly more. But Los Angeles, Boston, New York, we have chapters there, and so and again, the USC chapter was super social. Like bring you in and invite this. They see a student sitting alone. We're gonna invite you in, like be part of our community. So they're very social, very community based, very supportive. And the New York chapter was very activistic. So even within big cities, they look and feel a little different. We have seen Texas with everything that happening in Texas. We've seen continued growth and interest in students really reaching out and really being active. And I think that will balance out as that sort in the Midwest and the South, we'll continue to see that rising. Interesting a few years ago is when DeSantis sort of launched his Don't Say Gay and anti-CRT. We were sort of interested, how are students going to react to this? And their goal, for a large part, was to make students be quiet and to hide. And unfortunately, that worked. And so, the number of scholarships that we saw from Florida just plummeted that year. And so we really saw a disconnect, students disengaging and not being involved with things. And where the Trump administration has done Florida 2.0, anti-immigrants, anti-DEI, those sort of initiatives. We were worried that students would then also, that would be a quelling, calming, hiding aspect, but it hasn't. We've really seen students stand up and be vocal and be activists and whatever their interests are. And it was whether LGBT rights, immigration, voter access, racial justice, repro justice, women's equality. Students very much understand how white Christian nationalism is impacting all of these individual things, and how the importance of church-state separation is in impacting all of these things. So the intersectional activism, they complete.
And so that makes perfect sense. So basically, it's good that it's happening this way and they haven't been silent, because that is the desire. But basically, as they witness the world around them devolve into conservatism, for a better word, they basically we have to fight back and sort of be a counterpoint to all of these values of being a liberal democracy as it crumbles before our eyes. That's my interpretation.
And they're doing things from voter registration drives on their campuses, which they have done for years and years and years. But continuing to do that, we work with a couple of groups who do that specifically: youth voter access and youth get out the vote. But continue to do that, as well as our chapter in San Antonio, the university. When Texas sort of initiated their draconian, anti-abortion policies, they got together a coalition of students on campus to say, well, the health center on campus still has to provide evidence-based healthcare and birth control and resources. And the university did not go as far as they wanted, and so they were fine. So they started inviting other nonprofits from the local community to come in. So they sponsored them to come in. And so they, were doing evidence-based sex advice. They were doing, handing out condoms, dental dams. They worked with another profit and handed out Plan B to students, because the university wasn't doing these things. Then they couldn't get in the community. So they were if you want, we're going to partner and we're going to do it.
So they brought in from outside in the place where the university was literally just falling short.
Yes.
Which is impressive.
Yeah.
The glaring question, and you could tell me if you just aren't allowed to talk about this, is the counterpoint of what else is going on campus, because I didn't even know you guys exist, but I certainly know about what does exist on campus. And it could be that your stance as a nonprofit is like, we welcome all denominations, and like, hey, we're just here to be another choice, in which case I can rant instead of you. But yeah, I'm curious what your stance is on that, if you're able to share.
I mean, we believe in the freedom of and from religion, and then we have the freedom. And so that guarantees, and I think they work together. We want people to be able to practice their own personal religion. And at the same time, if you don't want to practice a religion, you don't have to. And the caveat that comes with that is you can't force someone to practice your religion or abide by your religious values, or or listen to your religious dogma. So students or even organized groups practicing their religion with themselves, we fully support. It is when they are doing things, or a campus is doing something, or a city or a state or the federal government is doing something to say, oh, we're going to impose, in the United States, often a very narrow, conservative religious view of Christianity on everyone else, because this is what you need to believe and do. That's where we take umbrage. And that's where we'll push back.
So I love that. I think that articulates it clearly, and really aligns with the classic concept of freedom of speech. I'll share with you a bit about my story, which I don't always do, but I think it's just a case in point, and I'd actually love your take in general.
Sure.
I was raised in a very specific sect of ultra-Orthodox Judaism called Aish Torah. I don't know if and they, one of their things is college campuses. That was one of their areas, and I actually was the next generation of it. So my parents got sucked into it. Actually, not on college campus. They were kind of like pre-post it, essentially. They didn't have a strong presence at that time, actually, on campuses. They went to Israel, raised us there, but were extremely involved in this organization's attempts at making Jews more religious.
Mhm.
Jews don't generally proselytize to the general public. Their goal is to just make Jews more religious. But that was a very strong agenda with very strong metaphors and some really nefarious strategies. And it was discovered, as I'm sure you can attest to, that the perfect time to lack of a better word, prey on somebody is when they're on campus, because they are first time out of the house, young and impressionable, and very able to be swayed in different directions as they're starry-eyed go out into the world. And so what they did, and what was copied by many other institutions, well, there's of course Chabad, which I'm sure you're familiar with, and they were like the counter to Chabad. Chabad is Hasidic Jewish,
Gotcha.
and they were non-Hasidic Jewish, but doing very similar things. Chabad's tactics, from what I understand, are quite hands-off, and they're pretty chill. They're Orthodox Jewish, but they're mostly just, hey, come drink vodka with us. These guys, we dissed Chabad. Chabad wasn't aggressive enough. Chabad wasn't doing the Lord's work properly, because they were not caring enough about whether people broke up with their non-Jewish girlfriend. That was a huge one.
Yeah.
Became observant of the Sabbath, kept kosher, and that kind of thing. And what was done, what a lot of my classmates did, like the people around me were all doing, they would become religious themselves, do a few years of study, and get sent out to college campuses to become the next generation chaplains. My friends are all over the United States and Canada. I was friends with people who were older than I was, because I was that little kid running around while all the big kids were like doing their thing. So they were all in this institution of study. I was just the local son of the rabbi kind of thing. But I became friends with all of them, even when they were older. And I watched them just go to all these places. Sometimes they're still there. A friend of mine, I was close with him. He's in Gainesville. He's like the guy in Gainesville, which is a huge Jewish community apparently, or college student presence. And the tactics used are manipulative. I'm just going to say it in case. The tactics are, a friend of mine who was involved for many years and recently was on a podcast too, describes it as bait and switch.
Mhm.
So you bring people in and you're like, hey, you want a free meal?
Yes.
And you start with a free meal. And then you start with the pressure. And the pressure is very subtle. It's not like, oh, God's going to send you to hell. Nobody wants to stick around for that. But it's like, don't you know the uniquely special uniqueness of you as a Jewish person, and so on and so forth. And the bottom line is, at the end of the day, people who you would not think would end up in such a conservative environment, considering their own upbringing, end up there. I know this is also true for Islam. I know this is true for sects of Christianity, probably Mormonism.
Yeah.
And you have to ask yourself, how would somebody, I ask this a lot as somebody when I criticize my own past, the only way it is possible for somebody to grow up liberal and then end up in those types of things is with manipulation. Because if everything was laid out from step one right in front of you, you would run away screaming. So there's this like little feeding it in and stuff like that. I've been talking for a lot, but I'm curious if you have any thoughts on any of that.
No, and I do, but I think there is a difference in religious student groups or even campus ministries who are there, to like, hey, we have an open door. If you want to come in, you come in. And I think, when you get into the ministry aspect, I think it becomes less and less of that because the sheer volume, the incredible, obscene volume of money that is funneled into campus ministries, especially the college university level. And so then, and their staff and buildings. And so then then there's a lot of external expectations on recruiting. So, and, and I think, there are less manipulative recruiting methods, and where you get into now some of the stuff that's doing I can't think of the name of it in a moment, but where they're in, high schools and those things, and it's the alternative time periods where they're taking students away, and it's, hey, bring someone else, and hey, you get toys, and oh, you get this, and you get to go back, and it's all these cool things that you get to show off. Well, if they came, they would get it too. And we're talking about young kids. And so, like, when we get there, like, the only thing is to be manipulative in that. And it's so obvious about what they're doing. So yes, the younger you're doing, I think the more hideous that is. And, you get like college students, well, they have a bit of a presence. They can choose that. They develop their schedule. They can choose where they go. They choose where they eat. They choose who their friends are. There's much more choice in that, where in elementary school, middle school, high school, there's not a lot of choice. But yes, I do think that's important things to watch. And we often get the information as far as what oftentimes conservative religious groups are talking about on college campuses, and just, oh, you need to go out there and proselytize. You need to go out there and convince people to come in. You're just putting this onus on other students to do this active work because they recognize they're getting less and less and less and less. And so I think they feel a bit of the realization of what's happening a little. I would assume it's scary. I don't want just about the prospect of what's happening for them, and as the way they see the world. So I think that does become very manipulative very quickly.
So it's actually, you're saying that the trend is towards secularism, and despite all this presence and all this money, they're not being as successful as far as pulling people in the way they used to. I find that very heartening. I have not been tuned in for over 10 years to the state of things, and I'm glad to hear this.
Yeah, we just did, I think it was Pure PRI just did a study, because we keep hearing about, the resurgence of young people in college religion. And they were like, no. And there was a little, gradual increase of non-religious folk, decrease of religious folk. And then both sort of post-COVID, both have sort of plateaued a tiny bit. And so they're like, religious is trying to spin the story. Oh, it's switching. It's great to come back now. And in reading some of their emails in the literature, the fun part is they're like, we just need to be more gaudy, or, talk more about God to get them back. And I was like, I'm not giving them advice, but I was like, no, you should.
You do that.
Yeah,
you do that.
You're pushing on me. You've quite ongoing.
Yeah.
So and again, and we're not out there actively proselytizing. We're not like, oh, come non-religious. We're here to help people who are going through, whether they want to question, and if they are questioning and they're like questioning their religion and they go back to being religious because that's what they want, I'm happy for you. If you don't and you leave religion and then you have a supportive community to come into, I'm really happy for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. And so you're saying, because I'm piecing together some of the tactics, because I only knew what the Orthodox, this one organization was doing. So toys meaning like, oh, come to these class series and get an iPad, or
T-shirts, like trinkets,
swag. Yeah.
Just tons of swag, candy, pizza. All the, stuff that younger kids want. And so like, oh, well, if you bring someone, you get rewards for bringing someone, a new person with you.
Yeah.
And those sorts of things. So it's for, and then if you're with your friend group and you don't want to go to that, but half your friend group or over half your friend group is doing that, and you're staying in the lunchroom. They're having pizza, you're having whatever is in the lunchroom. Then like there's also peer pressure to, even if you don't want to be there, to go.
To go.
And
Yeah.
and some of the messaging in that is it's hell and brimstone. And you're going to hell if you don't do da da da. So like even their messaging is like the values lessons they're learning are horrible. So, it's not even a good place you'd want young people to go. So
100%.
yeah.
Yeah, I argue that religion, as it's in the book, in the Bible, and that's the Old Testament is all I know, as if it's presented to children, is basically child abuse because of the content that is in there automatically. And so if you argue that a college student is just an older child, I would extend it. My kids are teenagers, and I'm like, their prefrontal cortex is not ready for college. But yeah, I love hearing the patterns. One of my favorite parts about this show is hearing, oh yeah, the Christians are doing it, the Muslims are doing it. It's not just this Orthodox thing. We didn't invent. Same thing with apologetics, right? The explanations of the bad parts of the Bible, and same thing here. What the organization that I was involved in, they took it next level, and this probably exists elsewhere too. They would take people on trips, especially trips to Israel. And what was genius about that is you're even more isolated from family. So you literally have people at your disposal for 10 days at a time. Birthright is really built on top of this, but it was actually originated possibly beforehand by these religious organizations. And there's religious birthright, which kind of they double dip. They get their money from the Israeli government and from their donors. And they basically say, like, you're going to do kayaking, but you're also going to spend 3 hours listening to a rabbi talk. And the way they did is generally they kept away from the hellfire and brimstone. They did all the positive speak.
Yes,
and then they give you the hellfire and brimstone at level 2. They had levels, literally tiers. And you would graduate to like tier 2. That's when the brimstone started.
Well, and I think, for Judaism and, being Jewish, because there's, I think, to me, the way I see it, there's the religious aspect and the cultural aspect. So, which I think other religions don't have that as much. So they have it's more the religious component, not the cultural. And so I do think, there is bringing people back to Israel and seeing that hey, I would love the free trip to Israel. I'll take it.
I used to complain that I was born in Israel. I want a free trip to America. Like, how come it only goes one way? Like, my heritage is American, why don't I go there? So that was funny. But yes, I mean, but the problem is it's not just like cultural. At this point, there's also Zionism mixed in, which is extremely problematic in its own right.
Yes.
And then you have the religious aspect of it all of like, yeah, okay, you've come from a long line of people who light Shabbat candles and eat challah, but why don't you also not turn on the light at the same time while you're at it? And that kind of thinking. Yeah. Do you know, do other groups do that too? Do like Christians take you kayaking in Utah? Like, can I go for a week if I wanted to?
So like one of the reasons like for alternative spring break is why we do our own. It's because a lot of those are religiously focused. And so they incorporate prayer and they're sponsored by religious groups and those sorts of things. So we work with another nonprofit. It's not non-religious, but there's no religious component to their program. So like, if you want to do something like that, that's organized, for a lot of people, whether they were religious or not of that religion, you're going and you have prayer in the morning and prayer before your meals and those sorts of things. So we sort of look at it from that aspect. But I did like getting into a little bit the manipulation part is we don't see it a bit as much, but sort of pre-Project 2025, it was it was like 27 Christian religious ministries came together, and they actually looked at like when students were leaving high school, they figured out where they were going to college. And so they had this marked and would send them information over the summer, like, and so then so they also did research, they knew within the first 72 hours of being on campus. So not of classes, like when you arrived on campus, the first 72 hours were important to bring you back to make sure you were in that organization or going to that church. So it started out all, very social sort of stuff. Oh, the pizza party at the beginning. Oh, the big group of people. And then that we get them in we develop the routines. We'll go to the residence hall's room. Someone will go there, knock on the door and go, hey, you're coming, which is really, at the beginning of college, it's really hard to say no just from the peer pressure aspect of that.
Yeah.
So there's, again, that's sort of, we don't see as much, it's still there, but we don't see as much of that anymore.
And this was being done to keep the continuity of whatever church they were in high school still, make sure that this doesn't represent a moment of like going out into the world and spreading your wings so much as like stay online.
Still, because they realized that more and more students were leaving religion and leaving Christianity. And so we have to, instantly millions and millions of dollars to build this entire network to be able to do this, and they go all coming together. So to prevent that, so their goal was to prevent that people from leaving. And one of their goals was to double the amount of Christian college students. So
That was the metric.
Yeah.
But how do they measure? For us, the Orthodox organizations actually had different metrics of like, how do we define a success? Like, is he keeping Shabbat? Like weird, like analytics like that. What were their analytics for the Christians?
I don't know specifically because they didn't, but I'm sure it was how many people were coming to church, how many people were in the student organization membership, how many people were in the campus ministry. They all have typical buildings that touch the campus property, so it's nice and easy for students just to walk to. And we were, I was at one in one of the schools in Texas, and all the ministries are right there next to campus with huge parking lots. So if you go there, you can park at the ministry for free, and you don't have to pay the campus to park. So
amazing.
There's intentional benefits of going and participating, being a member.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What was the thing you mentioned about Spring Break? Is a specific program that you guys offer?
So we do. So every year we have sort of 3 big programs. Our secular activist scholarships, which actually open April of every year. So intersectional activism, church-state separation, those sorts of things. And then we do our secular Spring Break. So it's a smaller group of students who spend their spring break, doing good in the community. And so the group we work with does disaster recovery. So it's been after hurricanes. So the last few years we've been in Florida in different locations. We were Hurricane Dorian in the Bahamas. We were on Great Abaco Island with a group, and like it was flat, and they had to like build these little bubble pods to have people stay in, and and then our first one was Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico. So we've been doing that for 8 years, I think now. And so I mean, it's work. You work the entire time, and it's hard work, but it's one of the best things ever. And the students who go are like, and we've had students who have gone on to continue to volunteer with that same organization in other deployments and those sorts of things. So it's it's just good work.
So you found a way for like a solid chunk of time. People have these times. They're being offered other sorts of programs by other things to take them all sorts of places. And you're like, we're going to offer you volunteer. It's secular. You can spend your time doing good work. You're not going to get proselytized at, and you stay busy and have a meaningful experience.
Yeah, and they're with students. For us, they're with students from other SSA students all over the country. It is a nice little tight group, and we do we do the T-shirt there. So so they get that. Like the first year, I brought because they do bring someone in to make dinner, but like breakfast and lunch, you're sort of on your own. Like whatever's there, you make your own. And so I brought Hostess cupcakes and Twinkies and little snacks that after the hard day work, I would go around and here you go. And then whatever, there's a community bins, whatever is left over, I would just throw in the community bin for whoever else wanted stuff. So
that's awesome.
Even with that, tried to build that community within the larger program. So the students who go on those will still talk with each other a long time afterwards, even though they're in completely different other states.
Yeah. So my last few questions for you are, speaking of community, right? It's known, like the stereotype of religion is just like community in a box. You add water and you mix and you've got community. What have you guys found? And it's the most challenging thing for people leaving religion. I know you spoke from your own experience of how you built community for yourself. What are some advice or recipes for either an individual to create community or for a community builder to say, hey, I want community because it's a human need, but I refuse to do it around a church. What can somebody do individually or in a society to help build community?
Well, I think we obviously look at it from a chapter or student organization model. So and it's within within the university system or the high school or the school system. And where they are looking at what needs they are. So do we want to do social things? Do we just where people come together? We want to do service? Do we want to do advocacy? So they get to really decide that. And again, we intentionally don't dictate that because, I think as I said at the beginning, we want them to be able to meet the needs of their campus and whatever that is. So we are there to help them. And so when Roe came down, we were like, hey, if you're going to protest, you need a banner, let us know. Here's 3 designs. You can pick one of these or let us know. These we get up really quick. The others, let it. So just whatever we can do to support that. But I do think, like, what we often tell the non-student groups who we work with, so other organizations who are in this sort of the secular non-religious field, is like, don't get bogged down in like, oh, we're atheists, or oh, we're humanists, or oh, we're free thinkers. We're like, younger people aren't gravitating to those labels as much, and you just close yourself off about who's invited and who's not. So we'd much rather open the door and be open to that. And we keep telling people, especially now in this time period, people want experiences. Like, they want to be doing something. So we're like, go out and clean a park. Do a park cleanup. You're helping the community. And it's really easy then for people to come and like, they get a task. And then now they're working next to someone who they don't know as much. But there's a natural conversation that takes place rather than a forced sort of like, we're sitting across from someplace at a restaurant, like, we've got to make small chat because we just can't sit here and eat in silence. So we just like trying to make things easy. And I think especially coming out of COVID and the isolation that took place and those sorts of things. So we're like, let it be fun, let it be doing something, and let just the natural sort of part happen. And we find the most success in that. And we do think for the young people today, some people still get stuck. Well, oh, you're supposed to be doing this. And we're like, young people so much get, again, how's church separation or white Christianism, how that affects their everyday lives and their different identities that they have. And they're much more holistic about it and understand the interconnectedness. And so I think it's important to understand that.
I hear that. And last question for you is, what would be your advice to a college campus kid to stay safe from some of the stuff that we've been discovering out? Like, things to look out for, clues. My clue is if it has the word fire in it, run away.
Yes. Unfortunately, we do have aspects where communities aren't safe. So yeah, you get to decide how out you want to be, whether that's, LGBT, whether your past experiences in things, whether it's non-religion. So, and again, SSA creates a safe place to do that and works with other groups that helps create that, so which groups are safe and tend to, because obviously it's a friendly group. So I think you don't have to do anything you don't want to do. And so if you want to speak up about something, you get to choose in what manner you do that and how you do it. And so if, we have a high school chapter that's having a problem with an administrator or principal. And so we're like, we encourage you to write a letter, go in. And they're like, yes, so that I'm comfortable with. Okay. And they're like, well, this isn't working. Well, would you like something from our staff? So, from the national office, they're like, yes, I want that. And it's still not, so it got a little bit better. And then we're sort of backtracking. They're like, well, do you want like some lawyers, a lawyer to write something? Like we can notch it up. And they're like, no, we're not there yet. We're like, okay. So everything that we do dictates from the student's safety. And if a student does something that's more visible, so if they're testifying or we offer them Delete Me, which removes them from huge databases so they become harder to find, not impossible, but harder to find. And we don't use last names on anything that we do publicly and those sorts of things, just trying to protect the students and to respect their comfort level and their level of privacy and those sorts of things.
I love that. And I would say that what I'm hearing from you is that almost every practice that you guys have like espoused and do can be learned from the inverse of what a sign of a predatory organization is. That's like kind of what I'm hearing as well. It's like, if somebody is pressuring you to do something more than you're comfortable doing, if something is coming from the top down instead of from what you've asked for, they've already volunteered the solution, then that would be a good clue that this might not be something that has your best interest in mind.
I would think that would be a great indicator to take us, okay, say hello.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Kevin. Keep up the great work. Where can people find you if they are curious about more about you?
So easiest place, secular students with an S.org. So secularstudents.org. We have information there. If if young people are interested, we have become a member. You want to start a chapter. We have lots of information online. We have our scholarships. Our conference will be that will be up in a few days. Our summer conference. We also, we are mainly focused in the U.S. We have had chapters in Canada as well. So we do, that's easy sport for us. And we do have sort of international affiliates. We're obviously less able to do the complete package of what we offer to young people, but we're doing a lot of virtual sort of things. So we have those offering as well. And if people want to support what we're doing, there is a donate button on the screen, and we'd love to have you to help that as well, because that's how we're funded and that's how we do what we do.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Kevin. Keep up the great work.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Good joy talking to you today.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Beyond Belief. If you found the episode inspiring, please share it with others who might benefit from it, and be sure to subscribe to it to get updates about future episodes.